Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about some fantasy books that have some kind of queer representation. I did some of these recommendation videos in the past. I'm slowly dipping my toes in with these because I don't know, I just always feel a little bit weird recommending books, but obviously it's a big part of BookTube and I have a lot of books that I want to recommend, but sometimes I have a hard time kind of figuring out the frame, like what kind of books to recommend. But I thought for Pride Month we could look at some fantasy books that I really enjoyed and that are in some way queer. Like some of the characters are in the LGBTQIA plus spectrum, and I wanted to be books where it's like more major characters, maybe not the a main character, because in a lot of fantasy we do have multiple perspectives or very big casts of very important characters, so it's not always the main character, but I wanted to be a character that is important to the story, that shows up a lot and stuff like that. So we'll see about that. I'm gonna recommend you 23 books, and if you do like these kind of videos, please leave a like and let me know in the comments, because I can also do one that is for other genres. But fantasy is my favorite one, so since I already had so many in the fantasy genre that I wanted to mention, I thought I'd just start there. So the first book I want to talk about is the 5th season, or the whole Broken Earth trilogy, because I love it. It is my second favorite fantasy series of all time. I'm obsessed with this series, so I had to mention it first. And in this book we actually have quite an important character that is trans. So I really enjoyed this series. We basically have this world where there is a group of people who have the ability to manipulate Earth, so they can do earthquakes and stuff like that, but those are oppressed because all of the other people are afraid of them. And we follow this world at the end of the world. So there is something very big and dramatic happening, and it's unclear whether this world and these people will survive. The next book I wanted to talk about is also part of a series, and the more important queer character starts with the second book, so it's very hard to talk about this without spoiling it. But starting with the second book, we have a more central character who becomes kind of a main character throughout the rest of the series, who is sapphic or bi. It's not quite clear, but she is in a relationship with another woman. And the first book, Grace of Kings, I should say what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Dandelion Dynasty series, and in the first book, The Grace of Kings, we already have some gay representation. So we have male couples that we see, but they're more on the sidelines, while starting with the second book, we have this central important character who's in a female-female relationship. So I love this series. It's basically a epic fantasy series that is inspired by Chinese history, and we are following a lot. A lot is going on in that series, and I'm loving it. I'm currently reading the last book, and I'm so intrigued to find out what happens in the end. Then the third one is maybe a little bit of an odd one, but I do really love it, and that is Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. And it has sequels, but I haven't read the last one yet, and I didn't love the second one, so I'm just gonna keep it at Carry On, which you can totally read as a standalone. This is kind of like a satirical take on Harry Potter, and I know that a lot of people did not like it, but I love this book. I think it's so much fun, and we're basically following Simon Snow, who's kind of the Harry Potter chosen one character, but maybe not, and he's not really doing well with his job. I love this book, and this has a very prominent male-male relationship that is kind of hate to love. Imagine Draco and Harry, just like that. Then we have one book that I just read this year, and I'm so proud I finally read it, so I have to mention it, and that is The Priory of the Orange Tree. In this one we do have quite a prominent female-female relationship, but it's not focused on the romance. I think a lot of people were kind of upset that the romance isn't a super big part of the story, but for me, who doesn't like romance in books, I was happy with that. I really enjoyed this book. It did have some like pacing and just balance issues, I think, but overall I really enjoyed this book. I definitely want to check out the prequel that came out this year, and in this world we are following again a whole world. It's like a very big scope, but we have the East and the West, and they have like very different relationships to dragons. While the West hates all dragons, the East actually worships certain dragons and then hates other ones, who are the destroyers of the world. So it's about that. There's a lot of struggle. We're following a lot of characters. It's a massive book, but I really enjoyed it. Then, kind of shifting the tone, and it actually matches the dream I had last night, because I dreamt of a zombie apocalypse. And we can actually read about that in the Dread Nation duology. I specifically recommend the first book. The second one was good too, which is not as great, but Dread Nation is such a fun book. It is, I think, more YA, and it's kind of a horror because we have the zombie apocalypse, but it's also an alternate history book. So this is set, I think, after the War of Independence, whatever it's called. American history, I have no clue. But it is a historical setting. It is an alternate history because we have zombies. And it is very fun. And in this one, we also see a female-female relationship. Next, I have two books that I want to recommend in tandem because I think they have very similar themes and vibes. And I think if you like one, you'll probably like the other, but one is much more popular than the other one. So the more popular one, I think, is Girl, Serpent, Thorn by Melissa Bashardoust. And this one is a retelling of, or like is inspired by a Persian myth. And we have a princess who has a curse that she can't touch anyone because she's kind of poisonous. And she wants to break that curse, and we follow that. And in this one, we have also a female-female relationship that I really enjoyed. Like the kind of trope with the love interest is one of my favorites. Like a love interest that isn't quite human, but like, I'm not spoiling anything, but yeah, I really enjoyed this book so much. And one that is very similar in the themes and the vibes is A Curse of Roses. This one has a similar setup where we have a princess who has a curse, but with this one, whenever she touches food, it turns into flowers, and so it is a little bit different. This one has more heavy religious themes, and I think a little bit more heavy themes in general regarding Catholic belief systems and stuff. But I really enjoyed that one as well, and it also has a female-female relationship, and I think some of the plot points and some of the vibes are just very similar, but not in a way that they're too similar, I think, but just that you probably enjoy both of them if you enjoy one of them. Then we have two very popular series that are in one world, so I thought I'd cluster them together, even though the characters that I'm talking about are different ones. So the first one is the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. I absolutely love this world. I'm obsessed, and if we get a third Crows book, I will be so happy. But yeah, this is a series set in Canada, so it's kind of a like Netherlands inspired environment, but also historical. And we're following a cast of characters who are planning a big heist for money. And I love Six of Crows, it's so good, and you've probably heard of it, so I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but this one has, I don't know if it's already in the first book so much, but it has a male-male relationship. And then the other one is the King of Scars duology, and this one is basically a sequel, so I wouldn't recommend reading it if you haven't read the other books in this world. I feel like you will miss out on a couple of things. So it's also hard to talk about what this is about, but it's about a different part of this world. It's about Ravka again, which the original trilogy was already focused on, Shadow and Bone trilogy. And so in that one, we do have quite a bit of a more diverse cast, and we do have a character that you could say is trans. It's not really that clear, but the it is implied very much, but we also have a bisexual character that is very important and one of the characters that we follow. Then one of my absolute favorite books of all time, which I will probably reread again and again because it's also short and sweet, is Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. I absolutely loved Pet when I read it for the first time last year, and then I reread it at the beginning of this year. And this is just such a great book because it kind of deals with a utopia. So it's basically the idea if the Black Lives Matter movement actually achieved a lot of their goals, what the world would look like. And so we have a world that has no more monsters, and with monsters they basically mean oppressors. But then our main character is visited by Pet, who is kind of this monster creature thing, and it says that there is actually a monster in this world, and they start hunting the monster. And yeah, it's just fantastic. It's such a great book. If you haven't read it, please, I beg you, please read it. Then we have a series I still need to finish, and that is the Hell's Library series. The first book being The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackwith. I love this series so much. It's really cool. It basically follows this library that is in hell, and we have a librarian whose job it is to take care of all the unwritten books. And it is dangerous because some of these books can become like people and escape the library, and so her job is to take care of those and get them back into the library. And we're following that. We have quite a big cast of characters. The main character does have an ex-girlfriend kind of situation that we see, but she also gives like very much like bi vibes, and there's also some poly vibes in the first couple of books. I still need to read the finale, so I don't know what happens with these characters, but I mainly love this series for the character interactions, and it just feels so cozy and lovely to me. Then we have The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nghi. Now, I still need to read the rest of the series. There's 2 more books out, and I think the 4th one will be out soon. So I'm very excited to read all the other books, but I loved this first one already. This one is a novella series, and I think we are following basically this cleric who is collecting stories, and this cleric is kind of non-binary, I guess. They don't use like a binary pronoun, and the Empress that is talked about also seems to be interested in other women. So it does have this this underlying kind of tone that just gender and sexuality is defined very differently from our world right now. Then we have one of my favorite things in the world, and that is the Monstress comics. Now, I absolutely love this comic series. It's the only one I'm actively following right now, and I'm so excited for the next volume that hopefully will be out in the fall. And in this one, we again have a very big fantasy world, but we have this war between 2 kinds of people. So we have the Organics, I think they're called, who have like animal parts, but they're mostly human. And then we have the humans, and they're at war. And the basic idea is that with the humans there are some witches, and the witches use the kind of power of the remains of the Organics for their witchcraft, which is very horrifying. It's a very, very dark series, but there is a lot of female love in this series, and I just, everything about this series is fantastic. Then from the very grim we go to the very cozy, and I have 2 books that are very well loved, but I just thought I'd mention them quickly. We have, of course, Legends and Lattes, which is the definition of cozy fantasy, where we have a female orc who decides she doesn't want to fight anymore, and she is opening a coffee shop, and there is a little bit of a female romance in there, but again, it is quite minor because I don't like romance, so I love this book. And it is very cozy, very chill, but there are some stakes, so I really enjoyed that. And then we have The House in the Cerulean Sea, which I also really enjoyed. I know that some people find it a little bit too sickly sweet, but I liked it a lot. I think all the like children are really fun. We have the basic setup that there is a home for children who are not quite your usual human children, and there is one guy who has kind of this administrative job, and he's supposed to go to this home for those children and see whether everything is up to regulation. And we do have a male-male romance that comes with all of that, and yeah, I think it's so sweet. So again, shifting gears a little bit, I have some sci-fi books which yeah, maybe they don't fit in here, right? I don't know. But I just put them in here as well. And my first one is the, what is it called? The Imperial Raj series. So the first book being Ancillary Justice. And this is by Leckie. And I really enjoyed this series. It's definitely a little bit harder for me to read because I'm not a big sci-fi reader. But what this series does, especially in the German translation that I've read, is play around with the idea of gender. Because we are following this kind of artificial intelligence character. And they were part of a ship. So at some point the artificial intelligence was the ship itself and had like many like robot kind of people that it could like send out and stuff, but the ship has been destroyed, and so all that is left is this one person where the artificial intelligence is still active basically, and we're following them through this world. And yeah, this plays a lot with our ideas of gender. So it basically doesn't give you the gender of anyone in the book, because there is a couple of exceptions I think in the later books, but because this AI doesn't recognize gender, because it wasn't created to recognize it, because in this world gender doesn't play any role. And I thought that was very, very interesting, as I said, especially in the German translation, where they decided to use the female words for everyone. And that is very unconventional in German. So I really like that. And then we have the very famous Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I also really enjoyed this book. It's by Becky Chambers, and this one also has a female-female relationship at the front, and it's just also cozy and fun, and we're following this ship, and their job is to basically make wormholes. So they're traveling through space and then they create these wormholes and stuff like that. I really love this because it also has this like cozy vibe, because a lot of the conflict is not resolved through like war or battles, but through administrative processes. And I thought that was so fun. I really enjoyed that. I haven't continued on with the series yet, but at some point I probably will. Okay, now we go back to more classic fantasy, and the next book is one that I think is a little bit underhyped, but I also completely understand that it's not for everyone, and that is Lady Hotspur. This is a book that I really like. It has very central like sapphic themes, but it is also one of those like very long, very slow kinds of fantasy where you follow a lot of characters and you get this like very all-round view of what is going on, while not so much is going on. So this is, I think, a prequel to The Queens of Innis Lear by the same author, and yeah, I love them both, but they're very, very specific. And then we have Strange Grace, also by Tessa Gretton. So this one is very, very different. This is more of a YA kind of like horror fantasy, because we have the dark creepy woods, we have the monster, and I must confess that I really need to reread this book because I don't remember too much about the actual plot, but I do remember that we have 3 central characters and they have very, very complex relationships with each other that are in the vein of like poly relationships. So since we still don't see that a whole lot, in fantasy books, I thought I shout it out. So the next two are like fun, happy, cute fantasy books. I think they're both more YA, maybe leaning a little bit older, but I just like these kind of books for the summertime when I just want something really fun and sweet. And so the first one is Cemetery Boys. I thought this was such a cute story, and we have a central male-male relationship in this one. We're basically following a guy who is trying to resurrect his cousin or something like that, but instead resurrects someone completely different, and now he's a ghost, and they're kind of trying to figure out a little bit of a mystery. Now this one centers a lot on the romancy bits and not so much on the mystery, so I thought that one was actually quite the weak point of the story, but just the fun, sweet, romantic vibes were really good. And then we have In Deeper Waters, which has like a similar feel, but more summery for me personally, because this one follows a prince who is traveling to these different islands for the first time, but then he gets abducted and he is saved by this mysterious boy. And yeah, this one was so really cute as well. I really enjoyed it, and it's not like an all-time favorite book, but just for these like fun summer vibes, I really liked it. The next one is one I've read very recently but really enjoyed, and that is Even Though I Knew the End. And this one is such a like interesting story because it is very short. You have this novella vibe, and we are following a character who has given up her soul, and she only has a couple more days to live before her soul will be collected, but she's trying to find this serial killer who also might not be quite human. There is magic in this, there's angels, there's demons, there is this mystery case of who's killing these people, and we also have a established female-female relationship that is important to this plot and the whole book. And then the last one is part of the Diviner series, but I specifically want to recommend this one because I think, especially starting from this point onwards, we have more like queer representation in the book, and that is Lair of Dreams by Baldree. This has two kind of main characters that become more important in the second book and stay more important in the later ones. One is a gay character and the other one is asexual. And while in this second book the asexual part is not focused on so much, it comes in a little bit later in the series, these two characters are like the main characters in the second book, and I love them for all the reasons. I think this is actually my favorite book of the series because I love the whole magic idea of it, and I love these characters just for who they are, how different they are, and how they form this very special friendship. I really like that. So the Diviner series is set in the 1920s, but it has magic, so we have a couple of teenagers who all have like very different magical abilities, and we are following little mysteries, but we're also trying to figure out the big mystery of why these kids actually exist, like where do they have their powers from. So that's what kind of connects the whole series together. And that would be all. Like, I can't say that I haven't forgotten any books, but those are the ones that, just going through my Goodreads list, jumped out at me. I hope you let me know what your favorite fantasy and sci-fi books with any kind of queer representation are, because I love to check those out, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye!